Hello, everybody. A little bit of surprise live video this morning. Uh, I wanted to share. So I've been in the throes of creativity over the past few weeks. Those of you who have been following my page know that I've been gone for a while. And once I got back, as usual, life sort of took its own toll, especially since I had left my dear, darling, lovely, wonderful wife, oh, so patient she is, for almost 2 weeks with the three kids without me there to help. Of course, she has my mother to help. That helps a lot. Thank you, my dear. Wouldn't be able to do without you. But still, there were, certain um, Piper bills to be paid. But all that's done, and I wanted to let you know that I had a lovely, exciting session just now, a podcast that was completely out of the blue and unexpected. For a little bit of context, one of the biggest indie publishing gurus out there is a guy named Mark Dawson. He made his name by effectively coming up with a system for doing Facebook advertising for his books that made him a multi-million-dollar author. He's really, really successful, and his courses make a lot of money, and a lot of the indie author community really goes in for his instruction on advertising specifically because it's so good. I am one of his students. I haven't really gone deep into the advertising yet, but he's got a podcast called the Self-Publishing Show, and the Self-Publishing Show has a sub-show, a smaller version of the larger show that is called the Self-Publishing Spotlight. That's the one, where it's a short 15-20 minute long podcast where the people at the company, at the Self-Publishing Formula, talk to new and established indie authors at various stages of their career. It's a short, bite-sized kind of offering that's interesting if you're curious to see sort of what kind of a person is an independent author, an author who publishes by him or herself. It was lovely. I had a really nice time, and I hope that it will lead to other opportunities in the larger podcast space. Because podcasting is something that we'll be going into. It's pretty much unofficially official, but there is going to be a podcast in my future, and hopefully in yours as well. It's going to be called In a Certain Kingdom, and although we haven't officially announced it yet, I am very happy to share with you the idea. Basically, I will be retelling the famous Russian, Slavic, possibly even Romanian fairy tales, but not merely retelling them. I will also be talking about what it is about those stories that makes them beautiful, eternal, and what makes storytelling in general such an important part of our lives. Because I'm all about that, as you know. It's not simply enough for us to escape into our stories, but it's important to escape into the right kinds of stories and to find the kinds of stories that give our lives more meaning. So I wanted to share, before I go any further, some music that's going to be included in the podcast. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it as soon as I've played it. Hopefully you'll hear this. That's just a teaser. There's plenty more where that came from. This was a really nice story. So as some of you know, I have a blog over at the Ancient Faith Network called A Light So Lovely. And over there, I was doing a series of daily blogs that I had intended to last for an entire 30 days. It didn't end up going as long as that. But some people were moved by the kind of stuff I was talking about over there. So moved, in fact, it was one of them, a certain Natalie Wilson. Natalie, if you see this, shout out to you. She emailed me out of the blue and said, I would like to write music for your podcast. And that's what she did. She sent me a bunch of impromptu clips of stuff she had composed on her piano, and it was beautiful. It immediately made me think of Pictures at an Exhibition by Mussorgsky, which is perfect for this genre, because that's exactly what Pictures at an Exhibition is. It's about not just fairy tales, but there's a fairy tale element to it. At least the last one, the picture in the exhibition, is all about fairy tales. I love the sound. It's like a combination of movie music and classical piano music. I love it. And so Natalie and I are going to be collaborating on this project. She's going to be doing the music and some of the editing for me. And so Natalie Wilson is actually breaking out and doing some podcast composing as part of her. She's basically trying to make a career out of it. So if you know of anybody who has a podcast, if you're interested in making a podcast, or if you need originally composed music by somebody who knows what they're doing, check out Natalie Wilson. I think her website is nataliewilson.com. I will quickly make sure that I got that right, in case I'm making stuff up, which would be very embarrassing because I wouldn't want to do that. Natalie Wilson is an American musician. Wrong one. All right, podcast music. No, Natalie Wilson. Well, I'm going to have to share more specific information with you about Natalie Wilson later, because apparently Natalie Wilson, the one who's working with me, has the same name as a rather successful musician out there, which is, there you go. Anyway, so that podcast, we are hoping to launch it in a certain kingdom in the beginning of May. But if you are interested in hearing or reading some of the stories that I will be sharing on my podcast before they are available, I will be making them available on my Patreon page to all of my patrons at odd and unexpected moments over the next few months. So if you like fairy tales, if you like the way I tell fairy tales, if you're interested in hearing more about them, now is a good time to join my Patreon page over at patreon.com/Nicholas Kotar. And you will see a bunch of interesting stuff that we're doing over there, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But I'm really excited about this podcast. I think it's going to be really fun. I think it's going to be really great. And I'm already getting a lot of excited buzz from people about it. So I'm hoping that that it'll find a good big audience. I also wanted to let you know that today I started a new thing. How do I even call it? Basically, I shared my first ever sci-fi short story with my readers over at Patreon. The idea is that I'm going to be writing 2 short stories a month based on some level or inspired by the Russian fairy tales that I retell for my podcast. Those stories are not going to be widely available. They're not going to be available at all to anyone except if I manage to sell them to traditional magazines. So the idea here is that I'm adding a new source for a new sort of avenue for my writing. I'm going to be writing short stories, and I'm going to be trying to sell them for money to magazines. But I also want some of my readers to have access to them. And so I've made these short stories available basically for a limited period of time to all my patrons, my Patreon supporters at the $10 level and up. There are a few of them right now, and I've sent out my first one today. And this story is called The Memory of Water. It's a kind of, well, it's inspired by a nonfiction piece that I read in the Best Science and Nature Writing 2019, a article called A Most Compassionate Substance, or The Most Compassionate Substance. It's about water. And it's a fascinating scientific article about the weird properties of water that scientists have not been able to really define, and sort of the interesting pseudo-scientific theories about water that come about as a result of the strange qualities of water. I love this because, living in dead water, as you probably know, are very important themes and important elements in short stories, in Russian fairy tales. And of course, the water of life, or living water, is a major element in my own novels. So that inspired me to write a story about water. It's a sci-fi story. It's not a fantasy story. So it's got that sort of real life scientific element to it, but it's definitely inspired on some level by living water in the Russian fairy tales. And it also stars all of my kids as adults. I wrote this story for them. I imagined them as adults, and I wrote a story about all 3 of them. And it was really a lot of fun to write. I wrote it during the craft workshop at Vegas, where I was already 3 weeks ago now. And it was really fun to write. I really enjoyed it, and I think it's a pretty good story. So if you're interested in reading it, go head over to patreon.com/Nicholas Kotar and join at the $10 a month level, and you will get access immediately to that short story. It's already available. I've sent it out to all of the people, and it's there. Also, we are starting tonight at the Patreon over at patreon.com/Nicholas Kotar. We are starting our new book in our Good Books for Great Lives book club. It's a book club where we read classics and old classics and new classics in speculative fiction, both science fiction and fantasy, where we are trying to find not merely the books that entertain us, but the books that teach us something about living a beautiful and good life, something that I feel strongly about. And we have a really, really fun time. It's a very active community of lovers of books who have a lot to say. And our first video session is tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern Time for That Hideous Strength by C.S. Lewis, the third book in the Cosmic or the Space Trilogy. If you've never read the book, it's a fantastic book. You do not need to have read books 1 and 2 in the series to appreciate book 3. Although if you have read books 1 and 2, you will appreciate it more, of course. But if this is something that interests you, reading books together with a group that loves books, that tries to get at the deeper side of things, that tries to really get at the beauty and the importance of literature and why we read it, this is where you want to be, because it's not just me blabbing, it's people in the comment section sharing some really wonderful things. So come and join us, patreon.com/Nicholas Kotar. The book club is open at any level, starting at $2 a month. Also, I wanted to let you know, for those of you who are interested in having me as not merely a storyteller, but also as a mentor or a coach, I do have several slots available at the higher Patreon levels, at the $50 and the $100 level, and there's also $75 level. But at these levels, you have personal access to me that you wouldn't have otherwise. I'm always happy to answer emails. I'm very happy to hear from people, from other writers. But the nature of my life and the nature of my work is that I cannot give a lot of individual, specific, and deep work time to people who send me their work for appraisal. It's just not possible. But if you'd like me to dedicate more of my time to your work, there's a way you can do that. Although I don't hire myself out as a coach, if you sign up at the $100 level at my Patreon, patreon.com/Nicholas Kotar, you will have 6 one-hour slots throughout the year, one every 2 months, where you will have exclusive access to me for an entire hour, where you can ask me whatever you like, and we can talk about your work. We can talk about writing in general. You can ask me questions about your projects, or you can actually make it into a coaching thing where I will give you 6 hours to work on a specific project. At a slightly lower level, at the $15.75, you will be able to have access to an exclusive Q&A session, which will also be happening 6 times a year. And at that level, I won't be working with you one-on-one, but you will be able to ask me specific questions about your work and about storytelling in general in our private Q&A sessions that will be happening once every 2 months. So that's what's happening. Check it out at patreon.com/Nicholas Kotar. There are lots of different stuff over there. I'm planning on using Patreon as basically my most regular transmission of stories and information and the kind of stuff I like to do. My newest book, The Soul of Russia, is going to be coming out next week, and it's going to be available to my patrons a week before everybody else. So if you want to have access to all of my books, effectively for free, you need only sign up at the $5 level. At the $5 level, you get 1 book a month from me for the space of 12 months. So check it out. There's a lot of stuff going on there right now. If you'd like to join our book club, it's a lot of fun. We're starting tonight. Just so you know that I'm not just making it up, here's me preparing for the book club tonight. There's That Hideous Strength and a collection of C.S. Lewis essays and The Abolition of Man, because, why not? And Planet Narnia, which is a fantastic book that I love and was signed by the author for me, especially 10 years ago. Love that book. If you haven't read it, do. It's fantastic. So that's it. And, progress on book 5 is coming along nicely. There's nothing to report negative at all about it. We are going to be publishing it on schedule. So for those of you who don't know, book 5 will be available to my patrons at an early date at the end of April, and will be going live to everybody in early May. So that's everything that's going on. just wanted to let you all know. And it's time for me to go and write some more book 5. So lovely to chat with you all. And yeah, go check out patreon.com/Nicholas Kotar. There might be something there that you might find interesting. Anyway, have a good weekend, and I'll see you all sometime again live. Bye-bye.